Hi, my name is Tara Alamany, and I am the award-winning author of Published with Purpose and the founder of Emerald Lake Books. And I am here today to talk about my book, Published with Purpose, and the contents of it. And essentially, this book is based on a framework that we developed for Emerald Lake Books authors, and we use it every time we work with them. And it is a goal-oriented framework that is intended to help them identify three specific goals. One is for their reader's goal in terms of what is the reader looking to get out of the book that they've picked up? Why did they pick it up? What made them buy it? What are they hoping the result will be after they've read it? The other is the goal for you as the author. So every time you write a book, you have a product that you are selling. So you are in the business of selling that book. And so what are your goals in terms of selling that book? Do you have sales goals? Are there other things that you want to accomplish from having written a book? Something like establishing your thought leadership or things along those lines. And the third goal is about the purpose beyond the purpose. So it's about those little more esoteric things that are harder to pinpoint, but is it an opportunity for you to take your success and give back to others? Is it about building communities? Is it about making a difference in the world? And so trying to identify those three specific goals for why you've written this particular book will help you as you go along in both the writing and the marketing of the book. And so let me give a little backstory as to how this all came about. It actually started when I was on a work study program with my college, and I was in college at the time working for a Fortune 500 company as a junior technical writer, and I was writing user documentation for computer systems. And what I heard often from the end users of these computer systems was that it seemed like the developers had coded things in a vacuum. They came up with ideas that they thought would be neat and fun to work on, but with little understanding of how people needed to use that system in the real world. And so as a result, I used to start thinking about these developers as happy little coders. You know, they were putting out the content that they wanted to put out. And as a result, it often had little bearing on what that software system actually needed to be used for. And oftentimes I find that authors can do the exact same thing. They get into what it is that they want to write. They're passionate about writing a particular story. Oftentimes you'll hear for fiction authors that the characters, kind of took control and ran away with the story from there. And the challenge is that if you don't have a clear picture of who your reader is and why they're reading that book, you can actually have this disconnect between the story that you want to write and put out into the world, and those readers are anticipating reading from you. And so as a result, you just want to spend a little time in reflection and understanding your reader and why they've picked up the book, so that as you write what you're passionate about, you can be writing it directly for them. So this publishing with purpose affects everything that you do from here on. And so we ask that, our authors start with getting an idea of who their ideal customer is first, because your ideal customer is not always the same as your ideal reader. So your ideal customer is the one that all of your marketing messages are going to be sent out to. And certainly it can be readers. And when it is readers, you may be thinking about, what comp titles, what are the comparable titles that they've read or authors that they've enjoyed, that if they liked that particular story or they liked that author, they would like yours as well. And the other is considering genre expectations. Are they into, paranormal sci-fi, and in which case you want to make sure that you understand what paranormal sci-fi consists of so that you can be writing to that audience. Another audience might be librarians, and librarians, as much as they're interested in the quality of the book, there are other things they're going to look for in the marketing materials as well. So they're going to want to see something called a CIP block or a PCIP block. And this is something that the Library of Congress issues that helps libraries understand exactly where and how the book should be shelved, so that an acquisitions librarian, when they get the book in, can immediately get it on the shelf, as opposed to having to wade through doing research to figure out what the book is about and where it fits for their library patrons. Another thing that can be helpful for them is if you have something called a sell sheet. And this is a one-page informational sheet that tells information about the book, about the author, but it includes purchasing information as well as BISAC codes and other bits of information that are useful to both librarians and retailers. And so retailers, bookstore buyers can be your next customer that you want to be thinking about. And there are certain expectations that they have. So they'll want to see a sell sheet. They like to see the CIP block, but something that's really important for them in order to make a book appealing for them is to ensure that your barcode on the back includes the price. And I know in the self-publishing industry, there's a lot of question as to whether or not you want to include the price in the barcode, because if you do that, then you don't have the flexibility of changing your list price as easily because you have to upload a new cover each time you do it. But in all honesty, if you want your book to be in bookstores, having a price barcode is going to be important to do that. As a matter of fact, for some bookstores, it's a requirement. If the price is not in the barcode, they're not going to carry it on their shelves. And if your marketing strategy doesn't include, wanting to get your book into bookstores, if it's an Amazon only focus, then that's not as big a deal. But if you want your book to be in bookstores, that's a consideration. You also may find that one of your customers is educators. And this goes beyond just writing textbooks. Educators use all sorts of books, and especially at different grade levels. And so you want to think about what are the expectations that they have for a book that they might bring into a classroom setting or into an advanced reader catalog. And so they want to see things like measurements that have been taken. The two most popular for children's books would be the Lexile score and the F&P score. And so understanding your ideal customer and what their needs are will help you identify exactly what you need to be giving there. And of course, the last category of potential customers is your gift givers. Those are buying books for the holidays, for birthdays, for special occasions. And they want to know, why will receivers of this book love it? What makes them stand out as a good gift giver if they give this particular book? And so as you're working on your marketing material, you want to be making sure that you are taking into account these different ideal customers. Now, the next step in being able to really make that connection and publish with purpose is knowing your ideal reader. And you want to be talking to them in terms of benefits, not features. So you're not going to be focusing so much on this is a paranormal sci-fi book, but what is compelling about the book? What does it explore? What themes are there? And so we have an exercise that we do with our authors that's covered in the book that's called Dear Reader Exercise. And this is a letter that we have the author write to an ideal reader. And we ask that if possible, they picture somebody they actually know, because that will make it easier for them to connect with their ideal reader. And the letter varies a little bit in terms of the framework, depending on whether you are writing a fiction or a nonfiction book. But if we start with nonfiction, there's certain questions that you want to answer in writing that letter. And this is going to be written exactly like you would write a letter to your grandma, dear ideal reader. And then it's going to answer these questions in the narrative of that letter. You're going to kind of identify who is the reader? What are they looking for? Why did they pick up this book? What appealed to them about it? You want to tell them what the book's about and what makes it special. You want to tell them, what inspired you to write it so that they have that backstory, they have that creation story to it, because those can be very compelling stories for readers. You want to talk about who it will help, as well as why you are the expert on this topic. Why is this story something that you are the only one can tell in this way? And what makes this book unique so that they understand how it stands out from the comparable titles that it's sitting on a bookshelf next to. And the last bit of this letter is, what promise are you going to make to the reader? So you're asking the reader right now to make an investment of both time and money to purchase your book. And so if they take the time to buy it, to read it, and they pay the money to buy it, what are they going to get out of this exchange? Because you want something that's going to be beneficial to both. And when it comes to doing the Dear Reader letter for fiction authors, there's some of the questions, there's overlap. So you're still going to talk about who the reader is. You're going to talk about what the book is about and what inspired you to write it. But instead of focusing on why you're the one to write this story or why you're the expert on this topic, you want to talk about why you love this story. What compelled you to write it? You want to talk about what you hope readers will get out of it. And of course, then you want to wrap up the letter with the same kind of promise that was in the nonfiction Dear Reader letter. What are you going to promise them if they invest time and money in reading the book? So that covers knowing your ideal reader. And then the next thing you want to focus on is kind of knowing what you want to achieve from having put the book out there. So this kind of ties into business planning. If you're thinking about a normal product launch, you want to think about what's the purpose of the book from your standpoint as an author, as a business owner? And so all books should either educate, inspire, or entertain, and hopefully they do a little bit of each. But beyond that, there are other things you can do with a book as well. You can use it to build your mailing list or generate leads. You can encourage engagement with people to try and kind of build out a community or get a topic talked about that's seldom talked about. You can establish your expertise in thought leadership or secure speaking engagements that may lead to helping you increase your fees for the work that you do, or create partnership opportunities for you with people who are in the same space as you. It can also create a passive income for you from book sales, although that's honestly typically the lowest revenue generator of book sales is when you write a book. Usually it's consulting and coaching and the other things that come along with it, sometimes merchandise. For some authors, it also allows them to set the record straight. So maybe this is a historical novel, a local history novel, a local history book, where you're taking a complex thing and talking to readers about it and explaining how things actually came about. The other thing that you can do then is focus next on what your marketing plan is going to be. And we have another exercise that we do that's outlined in the book that's called the Dear Author exercise. And this one's a little bit different because this one helps you get a good understanding of what success looks like to you. So if you've managed to do your business planning properly, you've hit the right ideal customer, your book is resonating with the ideal reader, what happens next? And so in this Dear Author letter, what happens is the future you, 18 months in the future, is writing a letter to you of today, explaining all of the things that have been accomplished because you took the time and effort and energy to marketing the book effectively. And so you write this letter to yourself. And the idea here is this is intended to be an encouragement from the future you to the you of today, so that you actually put in the effort to do that hard work, because marketing a book is not always easy. And let's be honest, it can be pretty boring sometimes. But the idea is if you want people to be able to find your book and discover it among the thousands of other books that are being published on a daily basis, you need to stand out in some way. And so this Dear Author exercise will help you figure out what success will look like to you. So you write this letter, and after you've written it, the next step is to go through with a highlighter or a pen and mark out, identify all of the different accomplishments that have been noted as a result of publishing this book. And we often find that most people, when they've written a 2 to 3 page letter, they'll end up with anywhere from 17 to 25 different accomplishments in terms of the reaction people had, the invitations that came from it, the opportunities or partnerships that developed as a result of it. And I refer to this as a verbal vision board. I'm not one who pictures things very well. And so I find it to be very effective writing myself a letter along these lines. And it can be a very emotional experience to claim your success and really stand up and say, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I want the outcome of this to be, because it can be very invigorating and give you the energy and moral support you need in order to actually put that time and effort in. So once you've identified those outcomes, what you do is prioritize them. Pick the top 3. If only these 3 things happened, your book would be a success. So what are they? And then the next step is to look at where you are now in relation to those 3 outcomes and identify, what do you need to do to get there? Who do you need to meet? What education do you need? What opportunities need to unfold? And start making plans for figuring out how to get there. And if you've accomplished any of those goals, then you can always go back to your Dear Author letter and choose another one, so that you always have 3 goals that you're working towards. The nice thing about having this is it gives you a clear focus in your marketing efforts, so that as opportunities come along, instead of being overwhelmed by all of the different things that you could do, it'll allow you to identify those things that you really should do, because they're going to move you closer to the goal that you've established for yourself. Anything else is a distraction and can be deferred until a later time when that is on the path to where you want to go for your next goal. So at this point in time, you've got your goals for your reader, you've got your goals for yourself as a business and an author. This last goal, as I said, is a little more esoteric. It's a little harder to pinpoint, but we refer to it as the purpose beyond the purpose. And this is, what are the things that you want to accomplish as a result of this book being out in the world? So is it an opportunity to give back? Are you going to donate proceeds from the book to your favorite charitable organization? Is it about making a difference or changing people's minds and hearts in terms of how they perceive a certain thing? I like to tell the story that Andy Andrews shares called the butterfly effect. And it actually talks about Edward Lorenz, who was an MIT professor, who's actually a West Hartford native from here in Connecticut. And this butterfly effect is the founding principle of the chaos theory. Back in 1963, Edward Lorenz was running a mathematical model, and it was for weather patterns, and it had 12 different variables in it. And what he found is he changed one variable just because he wanted to run the model a little more quickly. And he changed the variable from 6 decimal places to 3. Now, most of us would think that that probably wouldn't have much of a significant effect, but when he ran the model, what he found is that infinitesimal change in this one variable out of 12 was significant enough that the weather pattern of a 2-month model changed dramatically. And what that did is that encouraged him to postulate that essentially something as infinitesimal as the flapping of a butterfly's wings on one side of the world could ultimately create a tornado on the other side of the world. Now, of course, his peers scoffed and laughed at him at the time. They didn't think that that was at all a possibility. And yet it has since become proven and is something that is the founding principle of the chaos theory. And so it's something that, I like to think of in terms of what we as authors can do. So we have the power of putting our words out there, and our words may seem like very small things. We say things oftentimes without thinking or without thinking about what the consequences of that might be. But the result is that our words matter, and the words that we put in print especially matter, because they can change hearts, they can change lives, they can introduce us to people that we would never meet otherwise. And it has an effect. And so you have to think about you as an author. What is your butterfly effect that you want to put out there? What do you want to create as a result of people reading your content and loving your book and sharing the ideas from there? Because what you say matters. Your words are powerful. They're able to change hearts and minds, and they should be a force that's used for good. And so that wraps up what the major concepts are of Publish with Purpose. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. And I do ask that if you did enjoy it, that you purchase a copy, and you'll see in there a bunch of case studies and stories that support these and show you how this can be put into action with your own story. Once again, this has been Tara Alamany from Emerald Lake Books, and thank you for joining.